Hello and welcome. In this lesson, we will examine how the theme of conflict is illustrated in the play Romeo and Juliet, and more specifically, the key quotations that you should remember, as well as the word level analysis to do for this particular theme. Remember that the theme of conflict is what frames this entire story. Indeed, the play, even from the prologue, lets us know that it is the ongoing conflict that has lasted for several years between the Montagues and the Capulets, and the fact that their descendants have been taught to hate each other simply because they are from opposing family, that causes and leads up to the tragic deaths of both Romeo and Juliet. Therefore, of course, you can also interpret this play as being Shakespeare's way of warning about the damaging consequences and the devastating consequences that conflict can have, not only on the individuals who are engaged in conflict, so not only on the Montague and Capulet families, if in fact it does have a huge devastating consequence on them, but also it has devastating consequences on all the wider community and those affected by these guys, okay? So they make the state of Verona so unsafe that Prince Aeschylus has to basically threaten them and tell them that if there's any more conflict or any more disturbance of the peace, I'm going to kill whoever disturbs the peace next, okay? It becomes that serious because the conflict kind of spills over and affects the lifestyles and the lives of those around, okay? So not only the families directly, but also indirectly, everybody within that community. So Shakespeare is illustrating just how devastating and damaging conflict can be. But of course, remember contextually that family honor and even protecting and maintaining one's honor was something that was seen as more important. In fact, one's life was subservient to that sense of honor and dignity. Therefore, if one's honor was violated, people tended to settle these scores violently, okay? So Shakespeare is almost kind of making a message going against this culture, okay? Now, in terms of conflict, of course, as I've mentioned, it frames the narrative. Therefore, you need to remember key quotations relating to this particular theme. So as you can see behind me, I have selected the major quotations and the relevant quotes that you can memorize in the word level analysis you can do if you're writing about the theme of conflict for your coursework or exams for Romeo and Juliet. So let's get started with the first quotation. And this is taken from the prologue. So of course, the prologue already tells us what's going to happen. And we learned that from ancient grudge break to new mutiny, where civil blood makes civil hands unclean. This is basically telling us in the prologue that the ongoing ancient grudges between the Montagues and the Capulets has caused them to shed each other's blood over years. You know, one of them sheds the blood. So for example, the Montague sheds the Capulet's blood, then in retaliation, Capulet sheds Montague's blood, and it just keeps on going. It becomes this vicious cycle, okay? And this has been an ancient conflict. And this is from the outset framing the narrative and foreshadowing, of course, the tragedy and the tragic consequences that conflict will cause, because this will end up ultimately in the death of Romeo and Juliet from both houses. In terms of the word level analysis you want to do for this quotation, firstly, make sure you pay attention to the words grudge, mutiny, and blood, which belong to the semantic field of conflict, or you can even say the semantic field of war. This reinforces the destructive and ongoing damaging consequences of conflict. The other word level analysis you want to do is the repetition of the word civil, okay? And this repetition, of course, illustrates that these guys are not soldiers. They're not involved in any kind of combat. It's regular human beings, regular families who have such deep-rooted hatred that spans different generations, and this deep-rooted hatred only continues to perpetuate itself. It just keeps on growing and growing and growing. And of course, this shows how conflict can become its own vicious cycle that perpetuates itself. It just continues. It just keeps on going and going and going, okay? And obviously what this could be interpreted as is Shakespeare obviously criticizing this and showing how destructive conflict can be. The second quotation to bear in mind when it comes to the theme of conflict is when Juliet states, and this is after she has met Romeo at the Capulet ball, she's fallen in love with him and then she realizes he's a Montague, and she states, I must love a loathed enemy. And here obviously what she is illustrating is that just because he's a Montague, she can't control her feelings. She loves him, okay? Now what this is illustrating, so this is an interesting form of conflict that's being shown. This is a sense of inner conflict that she has, okay? So on the one hand, she feels that she really has to be faithful and loyal to her family, the Capulet family. However, On the other hand, she wants to be true to the heart, okay? So the heart wants what the heart wants. And in her case, she wants Romeo and she loves Romeo, okay? So she has this inner conflict. So conflict also, as a theme, is also shown in terms of the internal conflict that the characters experience. And in this case, Juliet and also Romeo experience this conflict between the loyalty to the family versus the loyalty to their own feelings and desires, and of course the loyalty to each other. In terms of how inner conflict is being shown here, this is illustrated in terms of word level analysis through the alliteration of L in loved and loathed, okay? So love and loathed, alliteration of L illustrates that she's loving something that she's meant to hate, showing us Juliet's own extreme internal conflict. However, she decides to resolve it by going ahead and still loving Romeo. Also, Romeo states, my life is my foe's debt, when he realizes that Juliet is a Capulet. Again, she is from the opposing family. He's not supposed to love her, but he can't help it. Now here, what he is saying is that basically and it foreshadows how he's going to pay for this conflict between the two families with his life, because essentially he's now realized that his life is now completely irreversibly changed once he has met Juliet. He loves her, he wants to be with her, and therefore his life will almost be the thing that will have to be paid for in order to maybe remove this conflict between the two families, okay? Maybe he'll have to, use his life in order to teach and to remove and resolve the conflict between the Capulets, so that maybe those after him can fall in love with who they want from different families. Now, of course, what this is illustrating not only is that Romeo himself, again, is experiencing the same conflict that Juliet is experiencing. So he, on the one hand, wants to be really loyal to his family, the Montagues. However, on the other hand, he wants to be loyal to his love for Juliet and he chooses Juliet. However, also what we can see here is that conflict is causing them these barriers. It's causing them not to have the ability to love who they want. And this is going to cause a lot of pain for them, okay? So the painful consequences of conflict. And in terms of word level analysis, focus on firstly the repetition of my, and also the hyperbole, how he's talking about his life being his foe's debt. And this obviously foreshadows Romeo having to pay with his life for the ongoing conflict between the Montagues and Capulets when he does die. The fourth quotation to bear in mind when it comes to the theme of conflict is when Tybalt, who is from the Capulet side, realizes that Romeo is at the ball, the masked ball. He is there uninvited. He's really furious at this. Even if Lord Capulet tells him, hey, cool down, don't do anything, Tybalt still says that there's going to be consequences for this, okay? Obviously hinting that there's going to be conflict that will be later, that will ensue later on. And of course he does, challenge Romeo to a duel. He states, this intrusion shall now, seeming sweet, convert to bitter gall, okay? So the intrusion is Romeo gate crashing the party. So this intrusion shall now, seeming sweet, convert to bitter gall. What he's basically saying is, yeah, okay, Romeo is enjoying this, gate crashing at this party, but this intrusion, whilst it feels really fun right now, it's going to turn into really bad conflict. And of course, what this is showing is how conflict and hatred can lead to really horrible, violent consequences. But also it's showing Tybalt's very impetuous character, his very violent character, and he's the person that really speeds up the play to its tragic ending when he later challenges Romeo to a duel. Now, in terms of word level analysis, you want to focus on how he foreshadows the future conflict, him fighting Romeo. And this is shown through the sibilants of S in shall, seeming, and sweet. And also the oxymorons, the opposite words, sweet and bitter, okay? Again, what this is illustrating is that Tybalt, he wants blood. He wants some kind of vengeance for what he sees as an insult to the Capulet family by Romeo being there at the masked ball. The other quotation which illustrates the theme of conflict is now when later on Tybalt does challenge Romeo. He doesn't know that Romeo is already married to Juliet, and he tells him, therefore turn and draw, okay? So he wants to have a duel, he wants to fight him. Here, of course, he's speaking in what we call an imperative sentence. And remember, an imperative sentence is a sentence that issues a command, okay? So he's commanding Romeo to fight him. He says, okay, fight, because I have never forgotten that you basically gate crashed our party and I'm really angry. So so I need to teach you a lesson. And of course, this is illustrating how conflict can sometimes spiral out of control, and also it's showing just how needless conflict can be, okay? Now, the word level analysis, in addition to noting that this, structurally speaking, is an imperative sentence, is you want to talk about the alliteration of T and therefore in turn, which shows Tybalt's anger and his violent rage and the fact that he wants to get started on fighting. Also, when Romeo refuses to fight Tybalt, okay, so Romeo secretly knows that he's married to Juliet, so he decides, no, I'm going to be a pacifist. Pacifist means someone who doesn't want to fight. I'm going to be a pacifist. I'm not going to fight. Mercutio then steps in and he sees that as embarrassing. He states, oh, calm, dishonorable, vile submission, okay? Now, this is an exclamatory sentence, so this is showing that Mercutio is annoyed. He sees this as, basically Romeo dishonoring the Montague family, dishonoring them by not fighting Tybalt back. Don't forget, contextually speaking, honor was a huge thing and people defended the honor violently, okay? So Mercutio is saying, oh, okay, get out of the way, Romeo. I'm going to do the fighting if you're not going to do it, okay? And again, what this is illustrating is this culture created a very vicious cycle of conflict, okay? Now, the word level analysis you want to focus on here, which obviously shows how Tybalt and Mercutio, they're basically the same type of personalities, the hotheads. They are very quick to act, impetuous, okay? And that obviously causes Tybalt and Mercutio to fight. Tybalt kills Mercutio, and then Romeo has to step in to kill Tybalt in turn, okay? Now, in terms of word level analysis, firstly, focus on how Mercutio uses the rule of 3 to describe calm, dishonorable, vile, the submission. So he's embarrassed. Oh, Romeo, how can you not fight back? Okay, so he sees that as really embarrassing. And as I mentioned, this is an exclamatory sentence showing that Mercutio is embarrassed that Romeo will not step up and fight Tybalt. The other key quotation which illustrates the theme of conflict is when Mercutio is defeated by Tybalt. Tybalt stabs him, kills him, and then Mercutio states, a plague on both your houses, okay? And now here, he realizes belatedly, just literally as he's dying, how damaging conflict can be and how nobody wins. And now he's died prematurely because of this conflict, this very senseless conflict. Now, in terms of word level analysis, you want to focus on the metaphor plague, because here he's just saying a curse on your houses. And of course, this foreshadows the fact that he has cursed their houses, and he and of course this curse is going to lead to the deaths of Romeo and Juliet. The other quotation is when Tybalt has been killed by Romeo, and then Romeo runs off. Then his body is discovered by the Capulets, and Lady Capulet is so furious. She says, an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, okay? So she states, for blood of ours, shed blood of Montague, okay? So she's basically stating, oh, this has been done, we need to do the same for the Montague blood, okay? So we need to, one of ours has died, Lord Capulet, please go off and kill the person that killed Tybalt, okay? An eye for an eye, revenge, okay? And obviously this is one of the reasons why conflict keeps on being perpetuated. It illustrates how destructive conflict is, okay? And the word level analysis you want to do here is the repetition of the words blood, okay, to show and to really create this tension, okay? So now it's really the play speeds up and it starts going towards this tragic ending. And of course here, Lady Capulet, when she says for blood of ours, shed blood of Montague, she is telling Lord Capulet, she's speaking in an imperative sentence, basically saying, Lord Capulet, it's now up to you to make sure that one of the Montague people die, preferably Romeo, the guy that killed Tybalt. The final quotation, which illustrates the theme of conflict, and more specifically the destructive, damaging theme, and obviously showing the one of the morals of the story as to why it's really important not to engage in conflict and the importance of forgiveness, is when Prince Aeschylus, at the end of the play, basically when they discover the dead bodies of Romeo and Juliet, and he confronts both Montague and Capulet households and basically says, look, here's the result of your conflict. And he states, Capulet, Montague, see what a scourge is laid upon your hate. Okay, so Capulet, Montague, see what a scourge is laid upon your hate. And what he is saying here is, these are the terrible consequences of this senseless, needless conflict between your two households. It has caused unnecessary strife, unnecessary unhappiness, and now it's also cost the lives of your two children, obviously illustrating the destructive and damaging consequences of conflict. The word level analysis you want to do mainly is the fact that he speaks in exclamatory sentences to drive home this point and to show that Prince Aeschylus is really emphatic and emotive in stating and showing how destructive conflict can be, okay? So Capulet, exclamatory sentence, Montague, both of these are exclamatory sentences, okay? Now, When it comes to conflict, as I mentioned, you want to be able to understand all of these aspects. And of course, there's lots to remember here. So I would suggest watching this video maybe once more in order to kind of gather this information again. And I hope you found this summary of conflict and the key quotations to remember useful in understanding this play. Thank you so much for listening.